Darksteel was an iconic set in the history of the Magic the Gathering franchise. It was also part of a block that spawned one of the best archetypes of all time. My name is Coach, and in this video, I'll be going over the best performing cards of Darksteel. Looking through this 165 card set, it's time to go over the 20 cards that have done the best overall. A quick reminder about how the cards are scored and matched up. A card in a professional setting will get 4 points if it was part of a top 8 for a Legacy or Vintage event, 3 points for a Modern or Extended event, 2 points for its time and Standard, with 1 point going to all other professional events, which can include Pauper, EDH, and Limited among other formats. So with that being said, let's get started with the list. Number 20, Chittering Rats. The black creature that forces an opponent to put a card from their hand on top of their library, Chittering Rats was part of 12 top 8 decks in its professional career. The first time this card had a top 8 was in PT San Diego back in 2004, where as part of the red-black deck for the Limited format. In this competition, it only had a quarter-finalist placing overall. One of the more recent decks this card was a part of was where as part of the mono-black control deck run by Mace Erickson in the Rags to Riches competition back in 2018. This deck also had a quarter-finalist placing, with the winning deck of this competition going to the blue-black Teachings deck. Chittering Rats would not get another true reprinting, and so far, this card goes for under $1 in both paper and digital copies. Number 19, Dragon's Claw. The artifact card that lets you gain life when a red spell is played, Dragon's Claw was part of 5 top 8 decks as a sideboard card. The first time this card was seen in a top 8 was in PT San Diego 2010, where it's part of the deck known as Mono Red. This particular deck would get a quarterfinalist placing, with the winning deck of this competition going to Jun. One of the most successful and recent inclusions this card was a part of was where it was seen in the Scred Red deck run by Kevin Mackey in GP Dallas 2016. Scred Red would go on to win the entire competition and beating out the second place deck Grixis Control. Dragon's Claw would get reprinted multiple times, with the most recent printing happening in the core set Magic 2012, and so far, the price of this card is going for under 25 cents in both paper and digital copies. Number 18, Pulse of the Fields. The white instant spell that was able to gain life and bounce back to your hand, Pulse of the Fields was part of 4 top 8 decks in its professional inclusions. The first time this card was part of a top 8 was in PT Seattle 2004, where it was part of the green-white deck for the Team Limited format. This particular deck would go on to help win the entire competition overall, with the other team members playing a red-black deck and a green-blue deck with a splash of red. The most recent inclusions this card was seen in was back in 2005, where it was part of 2 decks in GP Lily for the Legacy format. These 2 decks, Red-White Slide and Blue-White Control, would end up only getting quarterfinals placings, with the winning deck for this competition going to Blue-Green-White Threshold. Pulse of the Fields would not get reprinted again, and right now, this card goes for under 50 cents in both paper and digital forms. Number 17, Furnace Dragon. The big red dragon creature that becomes cheaper to cast with the more artifacts you have in play, Furnace Dragon was seen in a total of 9 top 8 decks, all occurring in the year 2004. The first time this card was seen was where it's part of Pro Tour Kobe 2004, where it was included in 4 of the top 8 decks in this particular competition. Between the 4 decks that this card was a part of, Mono Red Control was placed as a quarterfinalist deck, the decks Big Red and Affinity would get a semifinalist placing, with the winning deck taking the entire competition going to the deck known as And Go. This card was last seen in Worlds 2004 in San Francisco, where it was seen in 2 top 8 decks overall. Between those decks, there was KCI, which would get a semifinalist placing, with the other deck being Affinity that would get second place, losing to Astral Slide in the final round of competition. Furnace Dragon would not get another true reprinting, and currently goes for under 50 cents in both paper and digital copies. Number 16, Echoing Ruin. The red sorcery card that can destroy an artifact and potentially all artifacts of the same name, Echoing Ruin was part of 11 top 8 decks in its professional career run. This card appeared in 4 top 8 decks in Pro Tour Kobe 2004, just like Furnace Dragon. 3 of those 4 decks would get quarterfinalist placings, but the last deck would go to And Go, which won the competition overall. Echoing Ruin was mostly seen in the Team Limited format, with its most recent inclusions happening during the Team Limited competition during PT Seattle 2004. Echoing Ruin was seen 3 times between that team competition, with 2 being on the second place team and 1 being on the first place team. Echoing Ruin would not get reprinted again in another expansion, and as of this recording, this card goes for under 15 cents in both paper and digital copies. Number 15, Veridian Zealot. The green creature that was able to destroy a target artifact or enchantment, Veridian Zealot was seen in a total of 5 top 8 decks overall. It had its first successful run in GP Philadelphia 2005 for the Legacy format, where it's part of the quarterfinalist deck known as Salvage Game. It would get a little more traction in other Eternal formats since it had its most success in Legacy. The most recent showcase this card was seen in was SCG Atlanta, where it's part of David Vo's Elves deck. During this competition, that particular Elves deck obtained 4th place overall, with the winning deck of this competition going to David Hatfield's High Tide deck. Veridian Zealot would get reprinted again in Commander 2015 and Commander Anthology, and so far, the price of this card goes for under 50 cents in paper and digital form. Number 14, Oxidize. The green instant card that destroys a target artifact outright, Oxidize was seen in a total of 10 top 8 decks overall. It was first seen in PT Kobe 2004, just like Echoing Ruin, and seen in 2 of those top 8 decks. Between those 2 decks, Affinity would get a quarterfinals placement, with the 12 post deck finishing 2nd overall and getting beat out by the And & Go deck that was mentioned previously. Oxidize was also part of the Astral Side deck that would go on to win Worlds 2004 in San Francisco. Oxidize's last top 8 so far was seen in PT Los Angeles 2005, where it's part of the deck called Dredgetog. During this competition, this particular deck would get a semi-finalist placing, with the winning deck of this competition being the Psychotog deck. Oxidize would not get reprinted in any other expansion, and so far, this card goes for under 50 cents in paper and digital copies. Number 13, Arcbound Worker. The artifact creature with Modular 1, Arcbound Worker was seen in a total of 14 top 8 decks in his professional career. It was first seen in, just like a few cards on this list, during PT Kobe 2004. This card was part of 2 Affinity decks, with one getting a quarterfinals placing and the other getting a semi-finalist placing. Arcbound Worker would also be part of the Affinity deck that won PT Columbus 2004 for the extended format. Arcbound Worker had its most recent top 8 appearance in 2011, where it was seen in the Affinity deck for SCG Edison. During this event, this Affinity deck would end up getting an 8th place finish overall, with the winning deck going to High Tide, run by Alex Hatfield. Arcbound Worker would get reprints in both Elspeth vs. Tezzeret and the original Modern Masters, and as of the recording of this video, this card goes for under 25 cents in both paper and digital copies. Number 12, Skull Clamp. The equipment spell that can power up and be used as a card draw engine, Skull Clamp was seen in a total of 30 top 8 decks overall. One of the first few competitions this card was seen in was where it's part of 5 top 8 decks in GP Bruxelles in 2004. During this competition, those decks, which consisted of Affinity and Goblins, had 1 quarterfinals placing, both semi-finalist placings, and was part of both the winning and 2nd place deck of that competition. It would later on become a very powerful spell card in formats like EDH and Dual Commander as a cheap form of repeatable card draw. It was most recently seen in the Mox Boarding House Highlander competition in 2018, where it was an inclusion in 3 top 8 decks. Between those 3 decks, 2 of them would get a quarterfinals placing, with the other deck getting a semi-finalist placing, and the winning deck going to Kiki run by Patrick Tierney. Skull Clamp would get reprinted in 5 different Commander products and currently goes for under $3 in both paper and digital copies. Number 11, Fireball. The red sorcery card that can cause lots of damage, Fireball was seen in 25 top 8 decks overall. Fireball was printed very early in Magic's history and has been printed many times over, which included the Darksteel set. It was first seen in both Worlds 1994 and 1995, where it's part of 6 total top 8 decks between these 2 competitions. It was also part of PT New York in 1996, Worlds 1996, and PT Chicago in 1997, where it's part of numerous decks during that time. However, when it came to PT Kobe, it was part of 5 top 8 decks for that competition, which ended up having 3 quarterfinals placings, 1 semi-finalist placing, and would go on to be part of the winning deck. One of the most recent decks Fireball was a part of was the green-red splash black deck for GP Gothenburg. During this limited format competition, this deck would end up winning the entire competition overall and beating out Anton Johnson's blue-white deck. Fireball has been printed numerous times throughout Magic's history, with its most recent printing being in the set Iconic Masters, and this card currently goes for under 10 cents in both paper and digital copies. Number 10, Serum Powder. The artifact that can give you mana or restart your hand, Serum Powder was part of 17 total top 8 finishes in his professional career. It was first successfully seen in GP Columbus 2007, where it's part of the deck known as Suicide Black. In this Legacy format event, it would end up getting a semi-finalist placing, with the winning deck of this competition going to Hulk Flash. It would also obtain 4 quarterfinalist placings, 4 semi-finalist placings, and 1 first place finish. The most recent deck Serum Powder was a part of was the EU 2018 Vintage Championships in Paris, France. It was involved in the Dredge deck that would end up getting 5th place overall, with the winning deck of that competition going to the Silent Mentor deck. Serum Powder would get reprinted in the set Iconic Masters, and as far as the price goes, paper copies of this card go for under 50 cents, while digital copies go for under $2. Number 9, Sword of Light and Shadow. The powerful equipment card that enables you with many player benefits, Sword of Light and Shadow was seen in 22 top 8 decks in professional settings. One of the first competitions this card was a part of was the World's 2010 Sunday Legacy event. In this competition, Sword of Light and Shadow was part of the Zoo deck that would end up getting a 5th place finish overall, with the winning deck of this competition being Countertop. While getting many quarterfinals and semifinalist placements in its career, Sword of Light and Shadow was also part of 3 second place decks in competitions such as GP Detroit, GP Brisbane, and GP Boston. The most recent deck that this card was a part of was where it was seen in the Death and Taxes deck for GP Vegas 2017. In this competition, this deck, which was run by Andrew Calderon, would go on to win the entire competition, beating out the Izzet Delver deck in the last run of competition. Sword of Light and Shadow would go on to get reprinted in the original Modern Master set, and would get reprinted as a Kaladesh Invention card as well. As of right now, this card is currently going for under $30 in paper and under $1 in digital copies. Number 8. Sundering Titan. The artifact creature card that is capable of destroying lands, Sundering Titan was seen in 26 top 8 decks in professional competitions. The first time this card was successfully seen in was where it's part of the Astral Slide deck run by Terry So during Worlds 2004. In this event, this particular Astral Slide deck would only end up getting a quarterfinals finish, with the winning deck actually going to another Astral Slide deck that was present in that competition. Sundering Titan was also involved in numerous other competitions, with multiple semi-finalist finishes, second place finishes, with one winning deck overall. One of the more recent decks this card was a part of was where it's part of the Mud deck seen in GP Edison 2014. In this Legacy competition, this deck would end up getting a quarterfinals placing overall, with the winning deck going to Young Stoneblade. Sundering Titan would get reprinted in From the Vault Relics, Arch Enemy would get printed as a Kaladesh Invention card, and would be reprinted in Masters 25. As of the recording of this video, Sundering Titan is currently going for $1 in both paper and digital copies. Number 7. Sword of Fire and Ice. The equipment card that is in the same category as Sword of Light and Shadow, Sword of Fire and Ice was seen in a total of 52 top 8 decks in its professional career run. The first top 8 this card saw was where it's part of the White-Red deck in PT San Diego 2004 for the limited format. This deck would go on to get second place overall and losing to Nikolai Herzog's Black-Red deck in the final round of competition. In all, Sword of Fire and Ice would go on to obtain 23 quarterfinals placings, 13 semi-finalist placings, 2 second place finishes, with also gaining a total of 8 competition wins overall. The most recent inclusion Sword of Fire and Ice was a part of was where it's seen in the Legacy Pro Tour 25th competition in 2 top 8 Death and Taxes decks. Between these 2 decks, one would end up getting a semi-finalist placing, with the other deck winning the entire Legacy competition outright. In regards to reprints, Sword of Fire and Ice would get a reprinting in the original Modern Masters and would also get reprinted as a Kaladesh Invention card. On top of that, this card currently goes for under $60 in paper and under $3 in digital form. Number 6. Blinkmoth Nexus. The land card that could be used for mana and be a versatile creature, Blinkmoth Nexus was seen in a total of 87 top 8 decks in professional settings. Blinkmoth Nexus first showed up in PT Kobe 2004, where it's part of 3 of those top 8 decks. Between those 3 decks, this card was part of 1 semi-finalist placing deck, the second place deck, and the winning deck of this competition. Overall, this card had 39 quarterfinalist finishes, 23 semi-finalist finishes, 15 second place finishes, and was part of 10 winning decks. The most recent deck this card was a part of was where it was seen in Frank Scarron's Affinity deck at GP Hartford 2018. This deck would end up getting a quarterfinalist placing in this competition, with the winning deck going to KCI for the modern format. Blinkmoth Nexus would get reprinted in the dual deck Mirrodin Pure vs New Phyrexia, the original Modern Masters, and Modern Masters 2015. Currently, this card goes for under $7 in paper and under $2 in digital copies. Number 5. Darksteel Citadel. The land card that can produce generic mana while also being indestructible, Darksteel Citadel was seen in a total of 99 top 8 finishes in its professional career run. The first time this card had a successful top 8 was where it was included in 5 top 8 decks in PT Kobe 2004. Out of those 5 decks, 2 of them would get quarterfinalist placings, another 2 decks would get both semifinalist placings, along with obtaining the winning deck outright. As far as the entire competition scene goes, Darksteel Citadel obtained 43 quarterfinal spots, 25 semifinalist finishes, 16 second place finishes, with also being part of 15 winning decks, with most of these decks going to the Affinity archetype. This deck was most recently seen in the Affinity deck for the Pauper-Gaiden event in Rome, Italy back in 2018. During this event, this Affinity deck would go on to get second place, losing to the deck called Tribe in the last round of competition. Darksteel Citadel would get reprinted several times, which included 2 Commander products, 2 Dual Deck products, and even in the core set M15. So far, the price of this card goes for under 50 cents in both paper and digital copies. Number 4. Trina Sphere. The artifact card that heightened the casting cost of cards under 3 CMC, Trina Sphere was part of 64 top 8 decks in its professional career run. It had its first successful top 8 in PT Berlin 2008, where it was part of the deck known as Tezzerator, However, this deck would only end up getting a quarterfinal spot overall, with the winning deck going to Grapeshot Elves for the extended format. In all, Trina Sphere would get an inclusion in 29 quarterfinals placings, 18 semifinalist placings, 10 second place finishes, along with being part of 7 total winning decks. The most recent deck this card was a part of was actually in 2 Ravager Shops decks in the Eternal Weekend event in Pittsburgh. During that event between both of those decks, one of those decks would end up getting a quarterfinalist placing, with the other Ravager Shops deck getting a semifinalist placing. Trina Sphere was reprinted in From the Vault Exiled, along with being printed as a Kaladesh Invention card. As of right now, this card is currently going for under $35 in paper and under $5 in digital form. Number 3. Aether Vial. The artifact card that has the potential to get certain creatures on the field for free, Aether Vial was part of over 80 top 8 decks professionally. One of the first times this card had a top 8 appearance, besides PT Kobe, was where it appeared in Worlds 2004. It was part of Affinity that would only get a quarterfinalist placing, with the winning deck of this competition going to Astral Slide. In all, Aether Vial was included in 38 quarterfinalist decks, 27 semifinalist decks, 10 second place decks, with also being part of 13 winning decks overall. It was most recently seen in the Legacy PT 25th competition and seen in 2 Death and Taxes decks, just like Sword of Fire and Ice, which would end up getting a semifinalist placing and the other deck getting the win. Aether Vial was reprinted again in the original Modern Masters, Iconic Masters, and was also printed as a Kaladesh Invention card. Currently, this card goes for under $35 in paper and under $15 in digital form. Number 2. Arcbound Ravager. Arguably the most powerful Affinity card to ever be made, Arcbound Ravager was involved in over 100 top 8 decks in his professional career. It was seen early on in multiple top 8 decks in multiple events that included PT Kobe, GP Brussels, PT Columbus, and Worlds 2004. Arcbound Ravager would go on to be part of 48 quarterfinalist decks, 26 semifinalist decks, 15 second place finishes, along with being part of 12 winning decks. This card is still very active in the Eternal formats, as it continues to have decks being named after it. It was seen recently in 2 Ravager Shops decks in the Eternal Weekend Pittsburgh 2018, where it played alongside Trina Sphere, with those decks getting both a quarterfinalist and semifinalist finish. Arcbound Ravager was printed again in the original Modern Masters and as a Kaladesh Invention card. As of the recording of this video, this card goes for under $50 in paper and under $7 in digital copies. Number 1. Echoing Truth. The blue instant card that was able to return to the hand a non-land permanent, Echoing Truth was part of over 95 top 8 decks in its professional career run. It was first seen in the limited format in PT San Diego 2004, where it's part of the decks White-Red and Green-Red Splash Black. Between those 2 decks, the Green-Red limited deck had a quarterfinals placing, with the White-Red deck getting a second place finish. In all, Echoing Truth was part of 44 quarterfinalist decks, 31 semifinalist decks, 11 second place decks, with also being part of 10 winning decks overall. One of the more recent events this card was seen in was the 2018 EU Vintage Championship in Paris, France. Echoing Truth was part of the Grixis Thieves deck that would get a second place finish and lose into the deck Silence Mentor in the final round of competition. Echoing Truth was reprinted again in the dual deck Elspeth vs Tezzeret, the original Modern Masters, and even in Commander 2015. The price of this card is currently under $1 for both paper and digital copies. So, there you have it, the best performing cards of Darksteel. If you enjoyed this video, be sure to like it and share it to other members of the MTG community. Be sure to also subscribe to the channel for more Magic the Gathering videos such as this one. If you would like to help the channel out even more, click on the link below and go to our Patreon page and become a patron today to help the channel grow. If you missed the previous episodes of the best performing cards that go over Urza's Destiny and Weatherlight, click the links below to watch those episodes now. That is all I have today, everyone. Coach over here signing out, and I will see you all next time.